Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge. Since 1988, Thomas Schumacher has worked with the Walt Disney Company, setting new standards of excellence in film, television, and theater. He is also the president of Disney Theatrical Group, where he oversees the creation of all the new Disney musicals worldwide, including the 3 juggernaut musicals currently running on Broadway, which are The Lion King, Aladdin, and Frozen. And he has also released the 3rd edition of his best-selling book, How Does the Show Go On? And I'm here at the New Amsterdam Theater, where I caught up with Tom to chat about everything Disney. Well, first of all, congratulations. I'm always thrilled to be sitting with you.
Well, I'm so sorry for that. We should improve your life, really. That's terrible.
Congratulations on the 3rd edition of this incredible book, How Does the Show Go On? How did you originally come about to write this?
Well, there's, several origin stories. The actual origin story to the book is my dear friend Jeff Curdy, with whom I wrote the book. And he did the book map and gave me all the assignments of what I was supposed to write. Jeff and I were on our way to the Apollo Theater up in Harlem on the A train, and I had just given up my life in animation and was exclusively doing theater rather than commuting between the 2 coasts, which I'd done for many years. And I said, I'm going to have so much free time. It's now time to do the book. I wanted to do a book about theater for kids, the book I wanted. And Jeff said, well, when do we start? It literally happened like that. The book deal was put together in a matter of minutes, and then we started working. But the germ of it started when I was directing and teaching and making theater as a kid, and realized that I had made up everything because I had no resources. What actually happens here? What actually happens there? I had a subscription to the New Yorker and Theater Crafts magazine. I was the most informed child in America on how a Roscoe fog machine worked, and I knew every kind of bitchy thing that the New Yorker was saying. Neither of these were at all useful to a high school junior who was just trying to make theater. So I did the book.
You know, what I also love about your book is a lot of theater programs, and schools are using this to teach theater.
Well, that has surprised me, and I meet a lot of teachers who use the book. And because the first 2 editions had been available on Amazon, like as used books, because they have that great service, which I think is the greatest thing in the world. All these used bookstores linked up, so you could just buy books. And a lot of them were using it, and then, of course, they were losing all the materials that used to be inside it, because it was an artifact book. And because I get phone calls, do you have a clean copy with all the bits? No, I don't. I'm out. And that's how we came up with the idea for this one.
Well, let's talk about, because there's like hidden treasures in here with this augmented reality experience.
What's fun is that everybody over a certain age always has to read it where it says augmented reality, because you're convinced you don't know what the word is. Well, the story behind this is amazing, actually. I had never seen this technology. And for my birthday, somebody gave me a bottle of wine, and she said, take your phone out. And she put the app on it for this bottle of wine, and I held it over it, and the label began to talk to me, like Hogwarts. And I got so excited that I said, this is the new version of the new edition of the book. And it changed everything for us. There's 14 embedded movies in the book. Sometimes little featurettes, and sometimes just interviews, or just literally a photograph comes to life. And that, for me, it's a way for you. It says 2 things. One, it gives you more information than you could get in the book. It gives us information that we can update as time goes on, because surprisingly, it's not in the ink. It's actually out in the cloud, and you're just accessing it triggered by the ink. So we can update it and change it. But the 3rd piece of it, it says there's always a story behind the story. It's a metaphor, so that if you're a young person, 11 years old, and you're reading this book, there's always going to be something deeper to know about it. And I think it will drive interest in other parts of the book.
So I'm sure every time you go back to an edition, there must be something that amazes you that you didn't know before when you were working on it.
Oh, well, there's a lot in here. In fact, my beloved Natasha Katz, and many people watching this probably know 6-time Tony Award-winning Natasha Katz, who's oddly all over the book. I don't know how that happened, except that I'm just in love with her. And the first time I did the book, she read it and said, I just can't believe how much I learned, even with all of her experience that's in the book. But it also meant that this time going back into it, her whole section is updated, because everything in lighting has changed. It's just all different. And so the priorities in the book shifted, the format changed, it's a larger scale, there's different photography. There was more of an eye on diversity in this edition.
Yes.
Just to make sure that every kid who picks up this book finds themselves somewhere inside the book. That was really important to me. That you see that there is an extraordinary collection of people that it takes to make a show and to make the community of the show, whether it's on stage, front of house, back of house, and the people who don't even appear in the theater, like press and marketing.
Yeah.
And all of that was exciting to me, and I wanted to make sure that the book represented all of it.
Because what I love about that is people learn that it's not all just about being on stage. There are so many other elements that go into putting on a show that someone may want to do. If they don't have the talent to be on stage, they could be like, oh my God, I could learn to design sets.
Well, I often think about it because there's a section about hair and makeup.
Sure.
And I think about, I used to mentor at a high school up on Fordham Road, the Bronx.
Yeah.
And you go by all these wig shops, and I'm thinking, the people who work here probably don't realize that they're doing exactly the same thing here that we're doing on Broadway. And if you thought you wanted to be in the theater, and we say Broadway, but we really mean any theater, anywhere, because the book is really about shows in general. We run a beauty parlor. You and I are right now inside the New Amsterdam Theater. And about 3 stories below us is a very active beauty parlor with a lot of hair.
Yeah.
Human hair, I might add. And you'll learn from the book that it's mostly collected in Eastern Europe.
You have the most wonderful career with helping to create some of the most iconic, beloved, and most successful Disney projects. But I want to go back to the beginning with you growing up. Talk about the influence that your mom and cast albums had on you.
Well, cast albums were really big back in the day, and people forget that Louis Armstrong's cover of Hello Dolly, which actually drove the show to Broadway, it was a huge part of its success, but that Louis Armstrong Hello Dolly knocked the Beatles off of the top 40 number 1 slot. These songs were very big, and so when I was a kid, born a very, very long time ago, I listened to cast albums. My mom played particularly, we listened to South Pacific, The Music Man, and Hello Dolly, and Sound of Music on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And we memorized them, and they were part of our lives. And so when we would then do these shows or be part of them or see the movie version, they just rang so true. And it was around me all the time. Music was in my house all the time. My father also played the guitar, and so we would sit around and sing, folk songs and what have you. But nobody in my family knew anything about the theater, and nobody cared about the theater. So even though I heard this stuff, it really wasn't until, I did a few plays in elementary school, like at pageant things, but it really wasn't until I was in high school that I realized right off the bat, I should actually be in a proper show. And a friend of mine, an extraordinary American dancer and dance teacher named Burl Davis, who's kind of a legend in San Francisco, trained a lot of people. And Burl Davis, 50 years ago this month, started a dance studio that not that many years ago, actually not that, somewhere within that 50 years, I'm trying to think of how long ago, maybe 45 years ago, I started taking dance classes from him. And it changed my life. I was in dance class, I was in community theater productions, I was in shows with adults. There's some photographs in there of me, like doing Hello Dolly, but with a grown-up Dolly. And that really shifted it for me, working with people who were dedicating their lives outside of work to theater, right? I was working with people who ran a TV station and were playing Horace Van de Gelder. People who it was their avocation. And that gave me a real love for it because we were really dedicated to it. And then I went to college to study theater, and then it just never stopped.
Yeah. But your 16th birthday was very special to you, wasn't it?
Oh, my parents gave me season tickets to ACT, the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, in the heyday of William Ball. Bill Ball ran this theater. It was a repertory theater. You could see the same group of players play a show one night and a different show the next night. And my 16th birthday, the day after, I had my driver's license, because people did that back then at 16. The next day I took the family station wagon into San Francisco with my friend Lily Kerner. She was older than me. It was very exotic. And she probably was 17. And we went to see The House of Bernarda Alba with the legendary Ruth Cobart in it.
Sure.
Yeah, Ruth Cobart, who was Domina in the original. And she was also Jonesy in How to Succeed, singing that famous lyric, you got me, you got you, in Brotherhood of Man. She was in The House of Bernarda Alba. Who else is going to spend their 16th birthday at the House of Bernarda Alba? It's affected me forever.
But then life-changing was your first trip to New York City, 1977, right?
God, you know everything.
Well, I figured you know how it is.
Yeah, well, yeah.
We all have that, like that magical trip to New York.
Well, that's when I learned a surprising thing about myself.
Yeah.
1977, the summer Elvis died. I was
Yeah.
in Times Square when I got that news. Times Square wasn't quite what it is today. I was traveling with a high school friend, Dee Dee Sembler, and we were here staying at her aunt's house up on Park Avenue. And I remember getting off the plane, getting a taxi cab, going to this house, changed our clothes, and we were on our way to see our first Broadway show, which was Annie, the summer that had won the Tony. And I'm walking down the street, and it just hit me. That kind of smell of the subway, that's that funny electrical smell that comes up.
Yep.
And it was hot, and I was all dressed up, because you did that back then, going to see Annie. And I thought, I wasn't born here, I was born to live here.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time. It took me a very long time to actually live here full time. But I just fell in love. And I saw, 14, 15 shows.
Was there a defining moment for you that you said, I have to do something in the arts? Like when you said, I'm going to do something.
Well, I would say that happened when I went to UCLA.
Yeah.
And that's how I said I went to theater school at UCLA. But the reality is, I went to UCLA to become a shrink. And I was thinking I'd be like I needed to get a degree either in psychology or sociology, and I'd already planned to go study with this group in London as a graduate program in drama therapy. And I thought, that's the only way you could make money in this. And I all through high school had been a camp counselor, day camp, and a drama teacher and stuff in my local community center. So it just seemed like the obvious thing I would do. And I was in my freshman year. I was living in a really miserable dorm with a really funny roommate. And other people in my dorm were theater majors. I didn't know anybody from my high school who went to school to be in theater. I didn't know people actually did it. And I had no guidance counselor, and I picked my own college, and I basically sent myself there. So I was a little bit unguided in that. When I think about parents taking their kids today on college tours, I'm like, college tours? Just pick one and go, and make it work out. But anyway, and people kept asking me to be in their scenes, because in college you need scene partners, and you need, if you're directing a scene. And I kept doing scenes in my freshman year, and in the middle of the spring semester, I thought, what am I doing? I should just be a theater major. So I applied to the theater school, and actually, I don't know if I've ever said this publicly, I didn't become a theater major officially until just a few months before I graduated. But everybody in the theater department, the teachers were so great. They changed my life. My teachers were so kind and so lovely. And we got to really do stuff, building massive scenery. I learned how to sew and dye costumes and build scenery and everything. But I actually was petitioning for each class. I just always got in because they liked me. But for some reason, I just was so hard to matriculate into the department. So I was kind of a fake theater major until right before I graduated. You
have your hands in everything when you create a show for Disney. That's what I love about what you do.
Well, we're very lucky.
Yeah.
We here in this building, the 120-ish people who are here in the London office and all that, but we're lucky because we're an institutional theater. Heavily influenced, I'd argue, by my roots of going to ACT in San Francisco, and particularly my roots with the great Gordon Davidson, who founded and ran the Mark Taper Forum at Center Theater Group in Los Angeles, where I got to work right out of college. So because of this, I always had a sense of, you work in a building and everybody's together and directors come and go, but the staff is there, and there's an artistic director who's there, and there's a production team, and everybody was in-house, and so it's the only way I knew how it worked. And then when first day rehearsal, all hands on deck, and these shows got mounted. And so here, because we're not often taking partners or doing one-offs, we have a plan. We sit around tables like the one that's next to us, and we talk about what we're going to do. And so, like this week, for example, but most people watching would know that Frozen's been running for 2 years, right? We went out of town with it, developed it with Bobby and Kristen, Bobby Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez, and who wrote, of course, those amazing songs. They won an Oscar for it. And Jennifer Lee, who wrote the book, who got Oscar for directing the movie and everything. That, here with Michael Grandage and Christopher Arm and all of our partners here, we sit here and make the show, and then it opens out of town. We make all sorts of changes, wrote a new opening, new closing out of town, came into Broadway. And then when we were getting ready to do the tour, we said, you know what? We really need a song here instead of here. Let's change this. which we've always done to all of our shows. People who've been in them know I just don't believe in freezing a show. And we put changes into the tour, and we liked them, and we were all sitting there and said, we have to put these into New York. And we knew we had a cast change coming. So now we're all back in the room again. And right after this, I'm going to go upstairs and look in our design studio and look at a new design by Christopher Oram for this big staircase unit that we're going to have, and then a different bridge, these two elements that are going to be for the London production. I love that. And we sit and we talk about it, and how would the staging work, and how's it built. And I like that. I like the design process. I like the artists who make it. And whatever show it is, whether it's Frozen with Christopher or our many shows with my beloved Bob Crowley, to be part of that process and see people's work and meet and go into the studio. And what I don't do is I don't sit in rehearsal over and over, because then my job is different. My job is to help the director by letting them do their work and then come in and look at it.
Yeah.
Because if you sit there every day, then everyone's gotten kind of numb to what you've made. But no, we're in it, hands on, knees on, elbows on. If you don't like to work that way, we are not good people to work with. But if you enjoy that deep collaboration, it can be a lot of fun.
Well, that's my next set of questions, because you are the best people to work with, because nobody puts on a show like Disney does.
Yeah, part of it is because we love it.
Yeah.
But also, in fairness, we've been very, very lucky.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks we're lucky because we are a tiny little component of a very big company, and that company has resources. That's not actually how it works. We're very lucky because we've had some really spectacular success.
Sure.
Whether it was with Beauty and the Beast, and certainly The Lion King, where those productions afford us the ability to take a swing. So that, generally speaking, our shows work. Generally speaking, we have recouped, and they've been successful, and they've franchised all over the world. Twice, we have had shows on Broadway that didn't work, right?
Yeah.
Painful, right? Hard to do. But because we're successful, we can absorb that, rework those shows, put them back out. In the case of Little Mermaid and Tarzan, both of them went well into profit because we were able to do that. And that's really because of the success the business itself has had, that we can put that back into it. And so to that end, again, it's like a nonprofit. It's like a little show factory, and we don't give up.
Yeah.
And that's our great good fortune. Because of the success, we're able to do that. Really not because we're part of Disney, per se.
Well, I want to talk about your 3 juggernaut musicals that are running right now. When I went through the statistics for The Lion King, these are staggering. I mean, seen by over 100 million audience members worldwide, 25 productions around the world, the 3rd longest running musical on Broadway. What does Lion King mean to you in those milestones?
Well, I think that the first thing that anyone would leap to is, oh my goodness, the economic success of it.
Yeah.
And it's disingenuous to say that economic success is not meaningful. It's very meaningful to everybody who's a stakeholder on The Lion King. Whether it's a cast member like Lindy Wade Dlamini, who has been in the show for 22 years and counting. Actually, she's almost 23 years to the first day of rehearsal, right?
Amazing.
So it's meaningful. It's a life of there's many people. Bonita Hamilton has been in the show for 14 years or something. As Shenzi, it's meaningful that there's a show there that is their daily life. But it's also certainly meaningful to people who are stakeholders, royalty participants in the show, and what it's done for them. And then also what it's done for the life of people here.
Yeah.
So it's not fair to say that the economic piece doesn't mean anything. But I can tell you, as someone who probably travels more than any other friend you have, no matter where I go, no matter where I go, if people find out that I have been part of this extraordinary thing, I have a new friend. It's a crazy thing how this show has touched people. I get often told very moving stories about the death of a parent or a child, which are devastating to hear, but how people have used The Lion King to explain that this is just how it goes. The fact that this music is so beloved, that people know it, that they want to sing along, that you go to a baseball game and we hear Lebo's voice doing the Non Sangonia at the top, and people hold up babies all over the stadium. Whatever that is, that cultural imprint of it, I love. I love that it has changed people's perception of theater. I love to think, I was very lucky as a child in 7th grade. The first 2 plays I saw back to back were A Midsummer Night's Dream, stage directed by Peter Brook, and then to see Jack O'Brien's staging of You Can't Take It With You.
Yeah.
And those two productions, so different and yet so burned into my mind, it opened up to me what theater could be. And when I think about kids coming to see this remarkable thing that Julie Taymor has created with The Lion King, that if that's the first thing you're ever going to see on Broadway, it tells you everything is possible. And isn't that wonderful? So for me, the statistics are shocking. But what's most important about it is just the reach and how people have, generally speaking, loved it, and how they all want to tell you about their experience with it. And I always love to hear that.
Yeah. Then there's Aladdin, over 10 million worldwide audience members and 6 worldwide productions. What amazes you the most about the success of Aladdin?
That it happened.
Yeah.
Because, and people know this, we had Aladdin we were developing so that people could license it and do their own local productions. And my dear friend Chris Montan, who's produced all the music and everything we've ever done, was sitting next to me at a reading of it, which is fantastic Broadway, people singing through it. And Chris turned to me in the middle of the song High Adventure and said, why don't we put this on Broadway?
Yeah.
And thus began a crazy journey to figure out how to do it. And it was really going back to Alan Menken and Howard Ashman's original idea, this sort of Fats Waller meets Cab Calloway genie, and some basic story elements with the friends, Babcock, Omar, and Kasim, and all these things that people now know that are part of the show, that Alan brought back in from the drawers of artwork and writing that he and Howard did originally. We took it out of town to Seattle, tried to experimental production, not a pre-Broadway. And we learned certain things. Then we came back, did more writing, went to Toronto, and many people, including friends in this very room, didn't believe it would work.
Yeah.
I didn't have time to think it wouldn't work because I was in such a panic. It was a stone cold panic. And we just didn't give up. And people came to see it and were like, they weren't buying it. Something was clearly not right. And my dear friend Manny Azenberg, Broadway legend.
Sure.
And my personal rabbi. And I'm not even Jewish, but he's my rabbi. Yeah. And he came to see it for me. And then I tell the story a lot, but he came up to me and said, he started with, you know I love you. I think you have a hit, but the first half is just terrible. And we went and sat next door and, had a glass of wine, and we went on for 3 hours with Manny just going through it, not telling me what to do, but telling me what to think about. And the next day, we came back in the theater, and it's early in the morning, and Casey Nicholas said, what did Manny Azenberg say? I told him what I just told you. And he said, oh. And then the next day, Casey came in and said, can I see you in my office, which was 4 rows behind his deck table. We just called it his office. It was just seats no one else was sitting in. And he said, I have an idea. And it was for a full restructuring of the show. Yeah. Which we just, right there, I said, yes, let's do this. And who else? We were 2 weeks from leaving Toronto. We restructured the whole show. New material went in, new things, and we did it. And we brought it to New York, and we figured out the part that wasn't working, and that glorious cast that opened the show, with Adam Jacobs and of course James Monroe Iglehart, and we did it. And now the show has found its balance. I'm off to Mexico on Monday after we do this interview, and because we're casting it down there, and we're trying to think of a new way to play the genie there. And Casey's been such an amazing partner as director and choreographer, and really the pulse of the energy of the show. It's all that Casey, and the Casey meets Menken is Casey Nicola meets Alan Menken is such a great matchup for this show. Perfect people, right moment in time, great first cast, and the fact that nobody on the show gave up.
Well, let's talk about that phenomenon known as Frozen. I mean, this is a big week for Frozen. What's happening here in New York with Frozen?
Well, it was exciting because we wanted to put those changes into the show that we did for the tour, and we put in these 2 remarkable actresses into the leading roles, right? So Casey Levy and Patty Murin, who'd played it. Sierra Renee, who was Esmeralda when we did Hunchback of Notre Dame, is now playing Elsa. And this young woman who's right out of college, right, Mackenzie Kurtz, is she got out of Michigan last spring. It was her Broadway debut last night, and I couldn't believe how she owned it. These 2 women just took over, and there it is. And then someone who's been on Broadway before and part of the Disney family, Ryan McCartan, who's come in to play Hans. And Hans is a tricky part. You know, he's the bad guy.
Oh, yeah.
But he starts as a good guy. And he is so convincing as a good guy and plays it kind of doofusy in a way that's so adorable. And he's so mean at the end. He gets proper hissing and booing. The show's been hard to do. It's a very difficult concept. Michael Grandich and Christopher Orm and their big stage idea. Rob Ashford, Broadway, vet, has been so useful as the choreographer. This team gathered around this. We had to just figure out how to tell this story because it's not an obvious story, and it doesn't. And because of what Jennifer Lee and Kristen Anderson Lopez brought to it, it's a story that breaks the mold of what you think of as Princess and what you think of what is actual Disney material. It's Disney because of the way it's staged and it's fun and it's joyful and it's got this big heart inside it. But it has to break that mold, and they did that so beautifully. I sat there in the audience just having a ball last night watching our new cast of leads go in.
Yeah. Now, you have a lot of productions of Frozen, a few productions happening in 2020 is a big year. Where's it going?
Well, it's a big year. So we just opened the U.S. tour right before the end of the year, which tonight, when we're recording this, is in Seattle, and it begins its whole tour. But then, and we just finished casting in Australia. So we go to Australia, and where we open in July in Sydney, the Capitol Theatre, and then we zoom off to Japan to open it in September. In a brand new theater with our partners from the Shiki Company, where we have 7 shows playing right now in Japan. And then we race to London because my dear pal, the remarkable Andrew Lloyd Webber, has the Drury Lane, which he's totally remodeling, fixing up. I mean, it's all scaffolded. It's beautiful. They've redone the house, the interior. So he has done a remarkable transformation of this legendary theater, the Drury Lane. And that's where we go there. And then a year from right now, we'll be in rehearsal for the German production with our partners from Stage Entertainment. So that's a lot of those to get in. And then, of course, we have to open a couple of Aladdins in there, one in Mexico, one in Holland. We open a Lion King, all-new Lion King at the Mogador in Paris during that period of time. We will do workshops of material that we're doing, like Aida.
Let's talk about that. That's happening, right?
Yeah, we've done a lot of time in this room. This room is the story room. But Shelley Williams, who was Nehebka in the original production, is directing this production. And we're taking it, we're going back into it and exploring things that we would rethink today. We own it. Our collaborators, Tim Rice, Elton John, and David Henry Wong, are totally up for this idea of let's reinvestigate the material. There have been some startling things that have happened which I think people don't really get. I just spent last weekend with a bunch of museum people, and there's a fantastic museum in Boston that has an exhibit about this. But all these things we thought we knew about Egypt and Nubia were actually wrong. And Shelley has unearthed a lot of this, and this museum is doing a lot of it, where we've been researching, and what we thought of the dynamic between these cultures has changed. So we're really reconstituting parts of the show. We had that glorious score that of course, and it won the Tony and it won the Grammy for Best.
Oh, yes.
I mean, the score, Elton's songs are so great. But there's ways to tell that story in a way that I think is better for today. My dear friends who did it, Heather Headley and Sherry Renee Scott, it'll be different this time out. And I'm dying to jump back in with Shelley, who did the entire run. She played Nehebka, then she was a standby for Aida, which she played over 70 times on Broadway. So she brings a unique perspective to it, and that's fun for me. And of course, you probably know we're doing Princess Bride, which we'll do a workshop this spring of that, and that's been fun to do. And then there's 2 or 3 that we're not really talking about, as I look to my publicist who's over there to say ixnay on the,
But there's always something working.
There's we got new things, new ideas, reinventions. We're gonna take our Hercules to the next level, right? So last summer, Jelani Aladdin led that glorious company directed by Lear de Bessonet up at the Delacorte. It was like such a thrill. 285,000 people applied to a lottery to get 7,000 tickets. I mean, it's just astounding. And so now we have to figure out, this now needs to be seen. It's no intention of Broadway, of course, but there's all these theaters, around the country that are dying for it. So we're going to read through that in a few weeks because we've turned into a 2-act thing and made some changes. We'll do that. Menken has made some adjustments, as you do. And so we're going to go through all of that again. Yeah, there's a lot.
Well, first of all, I thank you for doing what you do from a producer's standpoint. But writing books like this, you make this whole world of theater accessible to people that might not know what it's all about.
Or that they could be part of it.
Yeah,
And you know,
yeah.
one thing I always say is, I didn't write a book to teach people how to work and build a career in the theater. Because I do think that, for the most part, the professionals will kind of jam their way in.
Yeah.
But they'll find it. But they may not know right off the bat that there's an opportunity for them, or just to understand it in a deeper level. 30 million Americans this year will see a Broadway show, either in New York or on tour. That's just the big Broadway equity tours.
Yeah.
That's not counting the thousands and millions of people who will be at Tuacahn in St. George, Utah, or the Muni in St. Louis, and across and across and across our fantastic country. And then you add all these LORT theaters, the regional theaters around the country, that it's millions and millions of people going to the theater. And how fun that they can understand a little bit more of what goes into making the thing that they watch. Theater as a vocation, as an avocation, are just something to be a really great fan of.
Yeah.
That was the intention here.
But you've also allowed your shows, these junior versions of your shows are all available now, right?
We're very, very committed to this.
Yeah.
I did shows all through school.
Yeah.
Sometimes I didn't officially license them because I didn't fully understand, but we've gotten this down. And the great Freddie Gershon, you know, who really built Music Theater International, MTI, up. Freddie was so visionary, saying kids across America could be doing this. And because Freddie is so respected, getting Stephen Sondheim to let him have the rights to Into the Woods and make a junior edition of that. So we have these hour-long versions of musicals, adapted scores, easier to sing. But kids doing it, it doesn't matter if they ever become an actor. Who cares? Or a director or a producer. But that they do it, how great. Learn to trust, collaborate, be depended on, learn you have to show up on time, learn to literally walk a mile in another woman's shoes. That's important.
Life lessons. Tom, thank you as always, my
great
friend.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
The memories, the magic, the unforgettable moments. For over 25 years, Disney has set the bar for Broadway blockbusters. And Frozen is the latest musical to bring the magic to life. Let your spirit soar, your heart melt, and make memories you'll never forget. It's not just Broadway, it's Disney on Broadway.